Hello, everyone. Welcome. I have the unique privilege, well, not that unique because he talks to people like me all the time, and honor to be talking to the wonderful, the infamous Martin Shkreli, the Pharma bro himself. If you don't know who he is, get your head out of your ass. Martin, thank you for joining me, man. How you doing?
Ben, I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, definitely, of course. You're the biggest guest I've had by like 7 orders of magnitude. So I'll be honest with you, man. This is kind of blowing my mind. Although I guess I shouldn't be that surprised. I mean, you have a history of talking to normies, right?
Well, I told the Today Show that I don't want to talk to them, and I've turned down magazine covers. But I'm happy to talk to people who are actually do real things. Like to me, the media is often, they're looking for the story that sells, and like real people are not always looking for that. They're looking for either the truth or something. Like for instance, the average reporter can't talk chemistry, but you can. There's a lot of people like that where you can get that expertise that nobody else could really get. And I think that's much more unique than listening to another vapid reporter trying to like make sensationalize something or something. And you can sensationalize if you want to, but you come from it, a level of expertise that most people don't have. So I thought
Right.
that was a really good opportunity, and that's why I really wanted to do this.
Right. I like that you bring up the media because I think you're kind of like an emblematic example of how media manipulation can affect even those of above average intelligence. I mean, I like to consider myself as, kind of a free thinker. And I definitely would consider myself more of a free thinker now over the course of the events of the last 6 years. But my first impression of you was, oh my God, this guy's, is evil and greedy and, people are going to die and blah, 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 blah. And then interestingly enough, I visited my brother's house and my brother knew a lot more. And he's like, no, watch some of this. And, there were these like conversations that you were having with just normal people on the phone. And this one guy, called up, complaining and, basically the whole like, greedy, executive sort of narrative. And you were fucking with him. You were like trolling him and shit like that. But then at all of a sudden the conversation sort of turned and you took a much more measured approach and you started saying, oh, well, you kind of have to have an incentive to produce a drug for so few people. Why would you do that when you can make one for a lot of people? And, that whole price necessity mechanism, if that breaks down, the whole pharmaceutical world breaks down. And so I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, like that's, I mean, maybe there's some context that I don't quite get. I mean, I don't really know much about this kind of thing on the executive level, but it was very eye opening that I even allowed myself to sort of be manipulated by the media. You know what I'm saying?
It's really funny you say that, and I was talking about this earlier on Twitter. There's another drug for this disease called toxoplasmosis encephalitis. Very, very, very rare disease, and this is pyrimethamine, which your followers could probably come up with a one-pot synthesis for it. This is a really trivial molecule from a medicinal chemistry perspective, but the point is that there is a similar drug called Bactrim that works just as well as pyrimethamine. So not only were you, I think, a little bit fooled by the media, and maybe some of the things they say about me are true, and we'll talk about that if you'd like, but pyrimethamine is not the only life-saving drug for toxoplasmosis encephalitis. Bactrim is very cheap. It's called trimethoprim. It's very cheap, and it works just as well as pyrimethamine. And doctors and patients were tricked by the media that because the media needed the story that Martin Shkreli is raising the price of a needed medicine that has no alternative. It's not true at all. If you go to PubMed and you read the literature, there have been endless studies that show Bactrim, cheap old Bactrim, works just as well as pyrimethamine. Most of our physicians switched to Bactrim, trimethoprim, but many stayed, about half stayed and said, we're going to stick to pyrimethamine because it's covered by insurance and we, just like pyrimethamine. So even the media has so much power that they were able to convince the world that this was a life-saving drug with no alternative. Not true whatsoever. I didn't mind that as the seller of the drug. I wanted, the better, but it's not the only drug for this disease. In fact, there are 5 or 6 drugs that work decently well for toxo. So again, the power of the media to distort lenses is really interesting. For example, Roundup. I don't know how much you know about Pharma.
Glyphosate, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really funny thing where you've had, we don't know the truth, right? But we know that Bayer has had to pay a lot of money, right? And so we know that the U.S. government, parts of the government, have said that it's safe. But we also know that if a trial attorney wins, right, in a court of law, the company's got problems and they have to write checks. And this also happened with talc and Johnson and Johnson's products. And like, you have this stuff that can spiral out of control just because somebody says something and people say, oh, I like the sound of that. And if you've ever met a trial attorney, these guys are really good at convincing you that the company's the devil and that they knowingly made this terrible molecule and that they should pay the price. And the truth is often maybe not all the way on the company side, but it's usually somewhere in the middle. And I think the case for me, at the very least, if I can get people to understand that, listen, I'm maybe not the patron saint and the holiest guy in the world, but I'm not what they said I was. And I think you saw that at the very least. And I really appreciate you for sort of mentioning that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up glyphosate because I kind of, read or heard some things about that. And it was like, I guess some lawn tech, spilled like an entire 55-gallon drum of it on himself or something like that. And that's why they're making this big stink out of this. And at the time, I was working for a startup defense contractor and we were working with like pyrophoric precursors and just all kinds of nasty shit. And I'm thinking like the stuff that I'm working with every single day is like 10 times more dangerous than this glyphosate, but nobody's like trying to get lithium aluminum hydride off the shelf. You know what I mean?
How about aspartame? Aspartame is the funniest one. I met some guys in prison, funny enough, some really smart guys. They're computer science guys, but they say, Martin, don't you know about aspartame? It's the worst thing in the world. And I said, hold on, this is a diamino acid, right? So this is just 2 amino acids. It's a dipeptide, right? I guess it's like, you're telling me that amino acid 1 plus amino acid 2 is somehow this toxic conjunction that's going to create this cancer. Like, I see it, and it's legal, of course. It's used. Aspartame is a sweetener used in the United States. But he said, oh, no, it's banned in other countries and this and that. And I said, give me a break. You've been sort of, you can go down rabbit holes and conspiracy theories, even something as staid and kind of like scholarly as chemistry, It's frustrating. Even the inventor of PCR, which is not chemistry, but it's adjacent. Somewhat chemistry too. Won the Nobel Prize, and then Corey was it Corey Mullis? I think his name was Carey Mullis. But he ended up spreading and believing in this conspiracy theory that HIV was not a viral illness. This is the guy that invented the ability to sequence viruses. Right? Like, it's such a not sequence exactly, but certainly polymerize them.
Right.
And so you sometimes see some of the smartest people, like you said, in science. They'll still sort of not fully. We're all still human, at the end of the day. And I think as you probably know, one of the biggest distinctions with PhDs is like you get this sort of like crown on your head where you say, "Oh, now I know everything about everything," and now I'm sort of this expert of all things. I'm a doctor now, and we know that like hubris in science is often quite fatal and really detracting. And some of the best PIs and PhDs and published researchers I know are some of the humblest people.
Yeah, definitely. I actually, I work for a CDMO. I work in process R&D. I don't know if you have already gathered that or not, but you know what? Let me ask you this. So you were a pharmaceutical executive, and like I imagine you were in regular contact with other high level pharmaceutical executives, right?
Sure.
So the question is, I mean, you seem like you really have like a good sense of the drug at every stage in the process, from early development to the production, the quality control, all phases of the clinical trials, all the like basically every rung in that ladder that goes all the way up to the sale of the drug. And I get sort of the sense that most pharmaceutical execs don't really know a lot about that bottom of the totem pole stuff. Like, could, the CEO of, big whatever big pharma company, insert name here, could they like kind of tell you the functional groups in the active pharmaceutical ingredients of the drugs that they're selling? Do you think?
I used to joke that the CEO of Merck couldn't tell you how many valence electrons were in nitrogen because, it was, and this is I liked this guy a lot, but we ended up clashing a little bit. And I'm from Brooklyn, where if you clash a little bit, you got to clash back. And I really respect Ken Frazier is his name. He was maybe the most important African-American executive or businessman ever. He became the CEO of Merck. I have this huge adoration for people. He went to Harvard. He's friends with another friend of mine who was a black guy who went to Harvard, and at a time when that was a really unique thing. And he rose up the corporate ladder to become the CEO of Merck. But there's just one problem: he's a lawyer. And I don't doubt Ken Frazier knows a lot about pharma. I don't doubt that he, has spent his life in the industry, and that's all a good thing. And I'm not going to pick on Ken, but I do think you're right. Now, some of the best companies in tech, the founders are programmers. Google, Microsoft, Facebook, you name it. And to me, it always bothered me that a lot of the companies in pharma, a lot of the founders were not, chemists or biologists. They're more sort of either business people or lawyers or whatever. Now, again, I'm a business person by school, but I also do understand every piece of it. And I liked it when people used to pick on me and say, well, he's not a doctor or he's not a chemist. I'd say, well, if you wanted to really understand the entire bandwidth of pharmaceuticals, you'd have to get about 10 different PhDs. And I don't think anybody has the time for that. Even if you were an MD, PhD, people would point at you and say, well, you're not a medicinal chemist. You can't tell me, like you said, about functional groups or complex organic reactions or purification, QA/QC, and what it means to have a C of A and what it means to go to the FDA and present them this repeatable method that you actually, can make this medicine. And so it is impossible to know all of those things by schooling, at least. You can kind of know a lot of them by experience. And again, I don't want to pick on Ken because I do think he did a great job. But the point is that, it is something that, for me, I have this weird thing as an entrepreneur where I want to understand what every person in the company is doing. And I kind of want to at least know a little bit. I'm not going to ever be a great medicinal chemist compared to someone like Dr. Vino or some of my other colleagues who were brilliant. Dr. Vino was a postdoc for Dr. Sharpless, who, of course, won his second Nobel Prize recently, which, is needless to say, one of the greatest achievements you can have in life. Barry's work at is unprecedented, both in click chemistry and in the reactions that are named after him. So Andy is a brilliant chemist. I'm never going to be him, but I feel like as a drug CEO and founder, I should probably understand a little bit about this stuff, and so I forced myself to learn that, and I appreciate that you noticed that. But it also applies to medicine, clinical trials, sales, marketing, all the stuff that is involved in it. And it's rather tedious. One of the things that I didn't understand coming from investing in drug companies is the biggest surprise for me becoming a drug actual executive, because I used to invest in these companies first. I didn't understand how important manufacturing was. I didn't understand that, between drug supply and drug product and getting the C of A's, getting the methods development, analytical methods down, I didn't understand how hard that was. And I really grew to appreciate just what it is that people in manufacturing do. I think a lot of pharma executives and investors and people like that, and people in the real world, I just saw somebody yesterday say insulin is free to make. I just sat there and said, oh my gosh, if you only knew how hard it is to get this E. coli to make this protein, spit it out at scale, and purify it, and then put it in people as an injection. It's mind-boggling. It's now, listen, maybe insulin's too expensive, maybe it isn't, but it's not free. It's very difficult to make. It costs billions of dollars to make. And I appreciated, it sounds like the field you're in, quite a bit more after I actually got my hands wet and feet wet and became a pharma founder.
Yeah, insulin has an interesting history because they used to use pig insulin, but a lot of people, it's not exactly the same as human insulin, and so a lot of people had bad reactions to it. And then I forget what the year was, but they figured out how to synthesize it. I forget how many proteins are linked together to make insulin, but it was quite an undertaking to actually synthesize this stuff. But there was no way, the yields were so small, so many steps to the synthetic procedure. There's no way to make that cost effective until they figure out this genetic modification of E. coli, and E. coli binary fission 1, then 2, then 4, then 8, and that's a very efficient way to produce it. So it's funny that a lot of these people who are complaining about the price or the supply of insulin, a lot of them are probably also against the boogeyman GMO, right? But it's right. Do you even know that the insulin that we have is a direct consequence of literally opening up the bacterial chromosome, injecting the genes for insulin production? Come on, man. Just
And then
think.
there's, yeah, this goop you have to purify, which is not simple. It's all this other cellular machinery that you got to cut out and purify. And what's funny to me is growing up in the industry as a young guy, I thought for sure that insulin was solid state peptide synthesis because I was like, why would you ever make it biologically? And then, of course, I learned it's made biologically. And I realized that when you get to this, it's about 40, 45 amino acids, right? When you get to this 45 mer, it's oligomer or whatever, you get to this 45 amino acid sequence, it gets unwieldy to do I guess, the Bach protecting groups and all that stuff that you need to do to sort of get that 45th, 46th, it gets sort of scaling that gets hard. Although Novo Nordisk, who is one of the original insulin makers from Denmark, I think they've done more work, and to their credit, they publish a ton on this, on how to sort of do this peptide synthesis at a bigger scale in a solid state way. They haven't obviously migrated to that yet because the E. coli does scale so much better. But it always made me wonder, like, why can't you do this on just amino acids? But again, it sort of shows you that some of these economies of scale are harder than you think.
Yes, absolutely. And let me ask you this question: when you were, a pharmaceutical executive, did you contract CDMOs at all, or
Sure.
did you? Oh, okay. Oh, by the way, I just realized like most of the people watching this probably aren't going to know what the hell I'm talking about. CDMO means Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization. It's basically like a company or an organization that pharmaceutical companies hire to bang out all the R&D and basically produce their products from early stage all the way up to commercial production.
It's funny you say that because a lot of people think about a pharma company and think about a bunch of people in lab coats looking at beakers and other expensive, mass specs and stuff like that. And more drug companies are just offices where a bunch of people meet and talk. And then when you have an experiment you want to do, you call your company, or Wuji is a great Chinese company I've worked with a lot over the years, or other companies, and say, here's the stuff, here's an email, and you can actually have a gigantic drug company that has no lab, no scientists that are in wet labs and actually doing experiments. And more you've seen that from companies like Eli Lilly and Merck and companies like that, where they've said, do we need to have a manufacturing facility when a company like yours can do it better? Do we need to do animal experiments? For example, toxicology has almost completely moved out of pharma, where CDMOs just do the tox studies. Tox studies are very gruesome, kind of not fun to do. You have to euthanize a lot of animals, dissect them, do a bunch of histopathology, things like that. It's a tedious, repetitive work. And if you're Pfizer, you're kind of better off just farming the work out to somebody else. Now, Pfizer might have enough scale that they actually can do it internally, and I think they might, I'm not sure. But so many of these pharmas have now pushed that work down to the CDMO level, and it makes sense. And manufacturing in general, a lot of it is done externally, especially with biologics and stuff like that. But again, some of these companies have a ton of scale and they want to do it in-house. And, if you're a smaller company, like some of the ones I've been involved with, you might, you kind of can't do it yourself because a lot of this equipment and stuff is so expensive that, you're much better off kind of piecemeal affording it that way.
So are you saying that you only use CDMOs, or did you also do some of your stuff in-house too?
I think so. Each drug is different. And, when you say CDMO, a lot of people have a different kind of definition because there's manufacturing and there's sort of research manufacturing, then there's clinical manufacturing. I've never, to my knowledge, and I could be wrong, so this isn't a government interview that I'm used to, so if I'm wrong, you don't have to crucify me.
We're not gonna hold you to the fire here, Martin. Go ahead.
I'm pretty sure I've never actually made in-house CGMP, or for that matter, even non-CGMP drug supply, either product or drug supply. I think I've almost always used external API and external fill finish, whatever you want to call drug product companies, including the one you work for. It's one of the big ones. And,
that's interesting. That's just very interesting.
Yeah. So there are a handful of companies that do a lot of this work, as you know, and the industry without your company, or I mentioned Wuji, and a handful of other companies, the industry wouldn't exist without those kinds of companies because they're the workhorses of actually doing the hard job of making the medicine and purifying it and sending it out and doing the drug master file and all this stuff. So that's CDMO from just a manufacturing perspective. But of course, some people say CDMO and they think, well, preclinical experiments, assay development, is that what exactly the scope of CDMO can be quite large. So I've also used CDMOs for all that stuff. So I think most of your small biotech, small pharmas, these days, there's certainly plenty that have wet labs, but I would venture to say probably half of the publicly traded biotech companies don't have a lab at all.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was gonna ask, was like what percentage of, what is your chemistry background? Like, did you take it in high school, college? Like what?
Very weak. I love chemistry since I was a little kid. I went to this very interesting school called Hunter College High School, which is some people say is one of the best high schools in America. I had a very rigorous, for high school at least, a very rigorous chemistry and biology education to the point where I was ready for college chemistry very easily. I did some chemistry in college, but the best chemistry I ever learned was on my own, reading chemistry textbooks and working with chemists that worked with me or for me, or I really feel like I worked for them. I mentioned Andrew Vino, who is a fabulous industry chemist, but also was an academic. He was a professor of chemistry, and there's nothing like having somebody like that on your payroll and saying, hey, how does this work? What is this Wittig reaction?
Yeah.
Why does this actually make sense? And so for me, I would never call myself a chemist because I don't want to insult people like you who are brilliant chemists. I do teach general chemistry on YouTube. I'm about to do a organic chemistry series.
Let's go.
Yeah. I have a good understanding of this stuff. I helped develop this software called Druglike, which does computational chemistry.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to talk about that too.
So I'm not you, but I'm not completely out of the blue. I'd say I'm maybe like a grad student level, or something like that.
By the way, I'm going to drop links in the description where you can follow Martin and tune into the chemistry. I know you said on one of your recent streams that you're going to be doing an organic chemistry lecture series in the coming short time. So link in the description if you want to check that out. I highly recommend that you do. But yeah, it's really interesting that most of the chemistry you kind of learn. Have you ever run your own chromatography column or your own catalytic hydrogenation or anything like that?
A little bit, not as much as I would have liked. We could visit CROs and sometimes they'll let me play around, but it's mostly my chemistry knowledge has been through my own. So I think one of the things I'm very weak at, which a lot of your followers are going to laugh at me, is reactions, and actual real world application. But when it comes to the pharmaceutical side of chemistry, I think I'm extremely strong. But when it comes to how would you synthesize this in as few steps as possible, I'm not the guy to ask. I'm no freaking clue. And for a lot of people, that's what chemistry is about. It's the soul of chemistry, is how do you go from A to B to C to D and what yield and stuff like that. And again, anybody can crucify me if they want, but for me, so much of chemistry isn't about how to transform molecule A to molecule D, and how do we do that with what reagents and what stuff like that. I'm not completely naive to that stuff, but for me, so much more of it has been about just the beauty of quite frankly, and this is why I like computational chemistry, kind of the beauty of the combinatorial explosion that can occur with Lipinski space, for instance. For me, some of my names on Xbox or on Twitter are all about rule of 5, which is this medicinal chemistry rule where you want certain parameters of log P and things like that for certain drug-like properties. This is why the name of the new company is Druglike. So you have to fit this box, and a lot of people say you can violate the Lipinski rules, and some people say you shouldn't. And, there's a big debate about that. But in general, the idea that there's an innumerable space of drug-like molecules has always fascinated me as sort of a computer science guy as well. There's actually a number of molecules, and you can sort of use graph theory and things like that to say, how many molecules can you make with 3 atoms? There's a number. How many molecules can you make with 5 different elements? Pick any one on the periodic table. How many can you make with 10? How many can you make with a molecular weight of less than 500 Daltons? That's something that, a computer can kind of, figure out. And we know from medicinal chemistry that generally you can't make a pill if it's more than 1,000 molecular weight, generally. And you also lose cellular permeability. So within that framework, with the organic elements, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, which is almost all drugs have just those and those alone, how many molecules exist? And we pump this question around the office a lot. And it's either something like 10 to the 20 or 10 to the 30. And there's a big difference in those numbers. And it's a lot of fun to think about, well, can a computer crunch all of those and put it on the list? I'm sure you know UCSF's, or you may know, you may not know, UCSF, there's a wonderful group there that made this thing called Zinc, which is a library of billions of molecules. And it's a really fascinating library because you can use an API with it. You can use, you can download the whole thing if you want, and it's all in these Smiles format, things like that, where you can kind of play around with this gigantic database. And so I think they're up to something called Zinc 20, and this is a group at UCSF that's really, really remarkable. This is John Irwin's group, and he's really been like the leading light in this field of like, how do we use computers and chemistry together? So for me, I've always liked that part of the world. I'm not saying I'm totally naive on the other stuff, but like memorizing the next reaction and the next reaction, knowing every single way that I can, transform this molecule into that, never got me going as much as like the beautiful diversity of medicine. And again, it's I'm missing a big part of the soul of chemistry, but for me, I really enjoy sort of the less synthesis and more sort of ideation around kind of interactions between, say, small molecules and proteins and things like that.
Yeah, I'm the complete opposite. The computational stuff where like you're talking about all the, seemingly infinitely many possible combinations, it reminds me, or I imagine just being on like a canoe in the middle of the ocean, not knowing like which direction to start paddling. It just seems like such a nebulous, like intimidating thing to get your head around, that you're kind of entering this entirely nebulous sort of area. And my computational chemistry experience is limited to this one experiment that I did in like physical chemistry lab over a decade ago. I feel old as fuck, but anyway, and it was like, oh yeah, you need to use this Linux operating system and open up the cluster and do the B3YLP basis set. And I'm just looking at all this shit and I'm like,
that's why I created Druglike, because the average chemist does not want to use Linux. The average chemist does not want to do any programming. The average chemist wants to use these tools that Schrodinger and companies like that make, but they don't want to pay $1 million for them, and they want to just go on a website. And we made druglike.com to do that. You could just jump on it and start making molecules. And that could be for ag, that could be for animals, that could be for human health, et cetera, or it could be for material science. And you're probably use the tool either called Amber or GROMACS to do like quantum mechanical molecular simulations. And those tools are almost you have to be a computer genius to get this thing to run right. And like I worked with a computer genius to try to figure out how to use the software. It took hours to run the simplest experiment. So we made all these front ends easy and stuff like that to try to like, my experience with CompChem was such a disaster 7 or 8 years ago. I said, there has to be a better way. And I tried to use one piece of software that just didn't work out of the box. Just installing it, it would crash after you ran it. And I'm like, this can't be true. And so if you want to connect that to a good compute service, like you said, a cluster, well, not many people have clusters lying around. I mean, I don't have 600 computers here. So you have to connect it to the cloud or something. And so we made that easy as well. And I'm not here to hawk my company, but I think there is a systemic problem with the way academics, and it's not, academics shouldn't take this the wrong way. Academics make tools that they can use. They don't think about, can I make tools that every chemist can use? And for me, every chemist should be a computational chemist, because it's like saying, I'm an accountant who is a computational accountant. No, every accountant uses computers.
Right.
Why wouldn't you use a computer? It's a great tool. It's just that if you're a chemist, there aren't great tools for you. And I'd like to change that.
Yeah, that seems like a huge opportunity for improvement in the field, is to just bridge that gap, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I think that, it doesn't even stop at medicine, which I know pretty well, but even things like fluid dynamics and material science and water apparently is still studied nonstop in terms of the crystallization, of water is still one of these things that people don't quite know. I am tempted to make a Kurt Vonnegut joke about Ice 9, but ice and how ice, forms is still something that's not really 100% understood. And people publish about this in Nature and stuff like that every day. I see a new paper about this stuff, including, like I said, a Nature paper about the freezing of water. There's still stuff we're figuring out about it.
Yeah, I guess you can always figure out, like, the the temperature and pressure, like to the next decimal place, right? Like there's always going to be that opportunity to know just that little bit more. Although there is, I imagine, somewhat of a diminishing returns effect in terms of what value that provides, given what resources you're spending on it. But
you can look at some of the papers, but I think my limited understanding is they're focusing on the different amount of species of crystallization that exist, conditions, like you said, under which certain species of crystals will form, and things like that. And these simulations are sometimes used to do that. And it's sort of fascinating to see, like, can you predict what looks like a stochastic sort of process in terms of ice or water freezing, and understand that better. And of course, there's other things like quantum chemistry and other simulations you can do with computers. So computers can do a lot, but computers haven't, and the people who design these programs haven't met chemists halfway and given them tools to again, people in academics that use Python and they use Julia and they use R and they use these tools, more and more, that generation, I think we're around the same age, that generation of kids, pejoratively, that are in their 20s, they're taught computer programming from the start. They're taught how to use Linux from the start. And that sort of like puts them in a different position from us, who are like, okay, we're Windows and Mac people. We don't know how to use these fancy parts of the computer. We need software for the everyday person. And that software is pretty hard to make. Whereas the person using a Python package, like not every chemist knows how to like run Python, like stuff like that.
Guilty.
It's not easy. So there's hundreds of rich scientific programs of Python for chemists, but good luck, maintaining your Linux, system.
Yeah, I think the other aspect of computational chemistry that kind of turns me off too is that I remember back in college I was taking this like organic lab, but it was led by a TA that really didn't do organic chemistry. She was into computational. So when we had our lab final exam, she took us to her lab where all the computational chemists do their thing, and it was like Yeah, it was basically just a computer lab, and it was like the most comfortable microfiber chairs they had in there, because it's like these people are sitting there all day, like they need to be as comfortable as possible. And that's kind of the thing that turns me off, is like the job where I work now doing process R&D, I'm probably like 80-20 on my feet to sitting down. And I really, really like that aspect of the job. I get to build the apparatus, I get to clean the glassware, I get to work with my hands, I get to walk around. I mean, there are some days where I sit down a lot more, and those actually make me more exhausted. Like when I'm sitting down all day in meetings, I'm way more exhausted at the end of the day than I would be if I was like carrying around 2 5-gallon containers of DCM, So that's kind of the other turnoff aspect of it for me. But I definitely have like the utmost and most profound respect for those who are good at it, who do understand it, because it is so important for the discovery of all these drugs that improve our lives in so many ways.
Well, like I like looking at a protein and understanding, okay, here's this pocket, it's a hydrophobic pocket, it's probably best to throw a methyl group in there and sort of design this in one's head and using software, and then saying, okay, well, what's a good isosteer to use here and stuff like that. But then when it comes to make the thing, that's sort of like, oh, I'm scared, And when we're fearful of things that are complicated in science, especially in math and things like that, like we tend to want to just avoid them and run away from them. I'm starting to sort of get over that and running to it and really understanding it better, because it is such an art. I was talking to a friend about total synthesis. I was looking at this paper, and I guess there have been a couple Nobel Prizes given out for total synthesis. Which is a really fascinating sort of cross section of art and science, where if you're trying to make some crazy natural product like a morpholino bond or something really much more outlandish than even that, and you look at it and say, is this even possible to synthesize? And those are such cool and fascinating projects, and it's sort of like this may lead to nothing, or this may open a whole new branch of chemistry, and we may find a way to synthesize it that isn't a big deal. Like I'm thinking of artemisinin, the artemisinin products. These are the derivatives for malaria. They're really, really hard to make. They have a really sort of weird chirality to them that doesn't lend themselves to synthesis, and they're made in a semi-synthetic format. A lot of people are wondering, how do you make this bond in a synthetic way? And there's basically no way to do it. But how does the plant do it? Because the plant is doing it enzymatically.
Right.
But isn't there a way that we could do that? And I think so, there was a breakthrough recently in that field. So I like total synthesis from that perspective because it's not mundane. It's such a hard puzzle. And I have all the respect in the world for people that sit there and say, this process is 6 steps. I need to get it to 3, because I had one drug that once had 11 steps. I mean, talk about expensive. It was so hard to make this stupid thing that, you have to wonder if it was even worth making at all. Because if you can't synthesize it affordably, then, you don't have a drug. And one of the things that shocked me in computational chemistry is that you could throw away the best binder and pick binder number 7, because binder number 7 is synthesizably, just 10 times easier to synthesize. And you'd rather have binder number 7 that could be 100 nanomolar affinity for the target, as opposed to binder number 1, which is 1 nanomolar, but it has this weird bond, it's hard to make, and it's never going to be made at scale. So let's just pick this inferior, theoretically, molecule, because you're making that trade-off. And I never really understood that. And, years ago, I realized that makes sense. But it's just fascinating to see that, synthesis and theory and, mixing business reality and all that stuff, it's such a cool space to be in. And I kind of feel deep regret for taking the pharmaceutical industry down a notch in reputation, because I love this stuff. I love what you do. I love what I used to do. I love chemists. I love chemistry. And to give the industry this black eye breaks my heart, because the medicines that people make for rare diseases, I was making this terrible drug that had this, it was a phosphate prodrug. So it was using Wiegand's prototype sort of idea, where you could mask the phosphate charge with just typical kind of prodrug stuff. And it was a neat idea, because a lot of sort of antivirals especially needed this idea, but we needed it because we were doing a phosphorylated substrate replacement therapy. So the point I'm making is it was so hard to make this thing, and we had a bunch of brilliant people who were finally able to synthesize it at scale and solve that trick, that one insight that made this from a drug that was impossible to make to a drug that was facile, more easy to make. And those people are heroes. I take that for granted for whatever reason. I think probably a bunch of people in pharma just sort of say, here's the molecule, good luck. Get back to me when you make kilograms of this. It's like somebody actually does need to be a genius to figure that problem out.
Yeah, the project that I'm working on right now at work has 9 synthetic steps in it. But most of those are done like sequentially, like one pot synthesis kind of thing. There's like not a whole lot of isolation points there. But yeah, I mean, there's this phenomenon, the more steps you add, where, the likelihood of any one individual thing going wrong is low, but the likelihood of one of many of those things going wrong is pretty high, because there's so many things that could go wrong. You know what I mean? So it's definitely yeah, exactly. And it's definitely a challenge. And, when you're talking about total synthesis, it kind of reminds me of that story about, I think his name was Jason Altom at Harvard. Have you heard that story?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking for, so just to give the context, basically there was this Harvard grad student that was working on the total synthesis of a natural product. I don't know what exactly the chemistry was or how many steps, but he was so close. He just had to like form one bond and connect these 2 units together. And the pressure and the workload and, the pressure that his boss, who I guess was like, I think he's still alive. He's like one of the most accomplished, most published, most cited living organic chemists. The pressure was so great that he, very sadly decided to take his own life, like in the lab with potassium cyanide, I think is what it was. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah. So I read this total synthesis paper a while back, and the organic chem book that I like is Janice Smith's book. She was a postdoc for this chemist who is named Dr. Corey. Corey won the Nobel Prize, and he was considered the total synthesis guru after Woodward, I believe, who was the first total synthesis guy. And Corey won the Nobel Prize for, I forget what molecule, but he's the total synthesis guy, and he's 90 years old and still at Harvard, I think. And the problem with Dr. Corey, people say, I've never met the guy, and I think people say good things about him too, is that he had, I think, more than one chemist commit suicide.
It wasn't, I think Jason Altom was like not the first one. Like he had another one before, like, yeah, it's a school of hard knocks over there, man.
Yeah, that kind of pressure, people think it's academics is like this, la la land where people, don't work that hard, but the pressure at a place like that, working for a Nobel Prize winner is just as intense as working at a business. I mean, or more intense sometimes. That pressure to be, have a reaction named after you, to be remembered for all of history as the person that synthesized X. I mean, that's a big deal, and it's a terribly sad story. But I certainly know that lab was known for its sort of high pressure, high stress environment.
I think a lot of grad school, or at least chemistry graduate programs are kind of like that, because we got to remember that it's not like law school, it's not like pharmacy school, it's not like med school where there's like a schedule, and if you do input X, then you will get output Y.
You're a doctor, yeah.
yeah. But with being a chemist, it's your project is done when you're done with it. If you want a 2-week vacation to clear your head, that's 2 weeks you're delaying your PhD. And it's really like, this is why, like, I'm so happy that I got rejected from the grad school to which I applied. I applied for a PhD program because I really just didn't know what the fuck I wanted to do. I wanted to like buy some time to figure it out. But I'm really glad that I avoided grad school because, just working as a chemist, as a bachelor's level chemist, you're kind of like an apprentice for a very long time. Like, it takes a lot of time and a lot of experience to get to that like innovative level where you kind of know exactly what the most efficient thing to do is, given the information that you have, like how to, what's the next move after this. Like, my boss kind of does that. And, when I can, I kind of put my own little creative spin on it, or try to suggest ideas, or carry out my own little small scale experiments to see, what original ideas I can come up with that might work. And sometimes I hit it, but most of the time it's just, the guy has a whole lot of experience. Like, it's the older guys. And yeah, I guess I can liken it to something like an auto mechanic or something like that. Like a fresh, just out of trade school auto mechanic is going to look at a guy with 30 years experience as like a god. Like, how in the hell do I get to that level? You know what I mean? So
it's really funny you say that. One of the greatest executives I ever hired is a guy who was a bachelor's in chemistry. He worked at Pfizer for a year or two, and he joined me, and he ended up having the greatest business success in our company's history. He made the firm hundreds of millions of dollars. I had very little to do with it, other than happy to be at the company. I was the CEO, and this is a guy, we took a chance on, and he delivered this massive deal that was super successful. And now he's sort of a star, in essence, in the pharma industry. And I'm really, really happy for him. So a lot of people think, okay, I'm going to get a chemistry degree. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to teach, or I'm going to be an industrial chemist. And that's not totally true, right? To have an understanding of chemistry is something that can benefit you in so many different ways. And it's funny to see sometimes doctors or dentists, whenever I'm chatting with them, they say, "Oh, you know medicine?" I said, "Yeah, a little bit." I said, "Do you know the structure of the drugs that you're giving me right now?" And they're sort of like, nah, not really. I did chemistry, for med school. I don't remember any of it. And I think if you really love this stuff, you see chemistry in everyday life. You see it all the time, everywhere. And I think, the people in business and pharma, to our original point where we started the conversation, like, there are simple things in physical chemistry that can often be over the head of a lot of business people in pharma. Like, I'll give you a funny example. There are some drugs that are too polar to enter cells. And, scientists know this, but an average business person maybe doesn't. And you can look at a molecule and say, gee, that's a really polar molecule. It's not going to get into the cell. Yeah. But you can have a company pitching you to buy this company for $1 billion. And the business people are like, yeah, let's do this. And it's like, wait, hold on, guys. You're telling me this drug is going to go through a lipid bilayer, but it's so polar. How is it doing that? And all you have to be is that one person in the room who says, wait a second, I don't think this drug works. And you save the company $1 billion or whatever it is. So, like, a simple understanding of chemistry can make you a star in any of those industries. And you'll see the business people are like, how do you know that? And I would always encourage my business people, like, here's a $200 textbook. Just read a little bit of this, and you're gonna change the way you think about pharmaceuticals.
It's funny you mentioned that, because, like, yeah, sometimes it works and you can save the company, all this money, but other times they're so freaking hard-headed that, like, they just want you to do it their way, and every reason that you try to convey to them as to why it's not going to work, they don't care. Like, and so sometimes I don't have a lot of experience with this, and the project managers do a pretty good job of just doing the talking on our behalf and kind of keeping us focusing on our lab operations, but I have sort of like heard things from other chemists like, yeah, I'm doing this thing. It's a complete waste of time and resources, but this is what I'm being paid to do.
That's the corporate world. You know, you actually work at one of the best run companies in the world, a lot of people say. And even at some of those companies, you're going to have these like corporate bureaucracy type of stuff. And like, you never know when like, oh, that guy owes that guy a favor. That's why we're deal. And like Merck bought this one company for $8 billion and the patent was expiring in like 2 years, but they did it anyway. And I'm like, just check the patent. Like, it's not gonna, this is not gonna work. This drug will go generic and you wasted all this money, but they did it anyway. And I'm just sitting here wondering, like, how did things like this happen? These boondoggles. And sometimes, the person saves the company and sometimes people won't listen to them. But oftentimes, like I said, like, if you have that just a small investment of time to learn a field you should know, you should do it. And I think, whether it's pharma or ag or wherever, material science, a little bit of chemistry can go quite a long way oftentimes. And it's, you don't have to be a PhD. You don't have to go to grad school. You don't have to publish. You don't have to do any of those things to make a difference. To really publish important work, you probably, are going to need quite a lot of information, but sometimes the smallest amount of knowledge can come in handy in huge ways.
Yeah, I'm really interested. I'm hoping, you know what, I think I'll try to do something where I sort of splice in a video clip, because I read that link that you posted, or I follow that link that you posted that has that, it looks like a protein and you can actually drag and move it around. So I'm gonna, for the video, I'm gonna display, an image of that protein. So what exactly was that? And what, I guess it's like some protein that malfunctions in some way that some drug is intended to treat. Like, could you explain that?
Sure. So this is, you saw this on my LinkedIn, perhaps?
Yeah, it was the LinkedIn post that you made, and it was like that. I think it was like a green sort of protein.
Sure. So we were doing, I did a screen of 1 million compounds, which is a lot. A lot of industrial pharmaceutical companies, chemists, and labs, a million compounds is a pretty decent sized screen. And we can do 100 million compounds as well. But a million compounds is, pretty strong screen. And basically, if you go to that link, you can move the protein around and visualize it. This is a protein called PARP. PARP is a protein that often gets mutated and goes wrong in cancer. It's a very important protein. It's sort of a DNA mutation corrector protein in a lot of ways. It does a lot of different things, but this protein, if you stop it, if you inhibit it, you can often extend the life of cancer patients. There are a number of good PARP inhibitors that are FDA approved. They've changed people's lives. They're really great. It's one of the signs, again, I love this industry. I think pharma does amazing stuff. We're in an industry that literally saves people's lives. So again, I have this huge regret, not for being outspoken, not for being a capitalist, but for hurting, this industry that I love, that I gave it this black eye for no reason. And I'm really chagrined and regretful about that, because if you look at this molecule, and again, this thing is really a beauty to me, that you can stop this protein from working if you gum it up just right. And what does that mean? Well, to a chemist, that means that you want to form this hydrogen bond network where the drug acts as a hydrogen bond donor and acceptor at different spots in the protein. So the protein stops kind of doing its job, which is often, in some cases, phosphorylating something or hydrolyzing something or whatever the case is. And this protein has a specific function, and the place where this protein is supposed to accept something, instead, we're going to give it, it's going to accept this drug, and it's going to kick out its normal substrate because this drug is so high affinity for that site, because we designed the hydrogen bonds to match perfectly. Now, my old school chemist friends say, one has a really funny saying. I said, "Oh, you got to try my software." And he said, "Martin, I don't play Nintendo." I died laughing because this guy's a gray-haired guy. He's older than both of us. And I'm going to show him this video and tease him. But he looks at this and says, "I don't need a program to tell me how to make a hydrogen bond." And, I understand that, but the idea behind this is you can screen 1 million different random molecules. One of them, or a series of them, the top quartile, forget the top quartile, the top 1% or the top 0.1%, those could be pretty good ideas for somebody trying to inhibit this protein. And you calculate the free energy, the sort of Gibbs free energy, which is the total sort of free energy of the ensemble, and you're trying to lower it, obviously, this basic thermodynamics.
Yeah.
And the drug that lowers it, or the candidate molecular entity that lowers it the most, could be possibly a medicine. Now, unfortunately, these things don't spit out medicines. I wish they did, but they spit out ideas. They're sort of like artistic ideas for chemists. They say, "Oh, you didn't think about a carbonyl here." You know,
Yeah, like clues. It gives you clues, and
yeah,
it also rules out the wide variety of things that definitely aren't going to work, which is hugely advantageous. Like that's the thing. If if anybody asks me like, hey, what's it like to be a scientist? It's like, be comfortable with failure and be comfortable with the fact that you, on any given day you might not figure out what it is, but you'll at least know a few things that it's not, and that gets
you know,
you just a little bit closer, right?
I want to take a total aside here because Lex Fridman's podcast. I think he's a computer scientist, and he's been able to interview Kanye West, Elon Musk, but also a bunch of computer scientists. And he has these long interviews with them that are so fascinating. And he's now has millions of followers and viewers. But he is a scientist. He's a computer scientist, but he's a scientist nevertheless. And he knows a lot about different areas. And I hope that people like you and people like Lex become the bigger voices in the world. Because as great as some journalists are, journalists don't come to the field with expertise. They come to the field with, unfortunately, sometimes, not all of them. I was dating a very great journalist who covered me. Sometimes they come with this agenda of sensationalizing or getting a story that's going to be really sexy. But Lex and you come to the situation with, hey, I actually have subject matter expertise here, and I can have a conversation that the average gumshoe reporter sort of can't. And I think that's something that is really awesome about what you're doing. And I hope that you continue to interview a lot of people in sort of this world.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, the whole interviewing thing is just kind of like, I mean, when I got the opportunity to talk to you, it's like, wow, this is like an amazing opportunity. But in the past, it was kind of like just talking to other chemistry YouTubers, try to like, pinch off a little bit of their audience. But, honestly, nowadays, I just kind of do YouTube when I feel like doing it, when it's but I don't want to go on over and over again about myself, but my priority has shifted more locally, like toward my family. As I told you, I have two girls, ages 4 and 2, and at least for the next few years while they're still little, like my my big thing is just I want to avoid that moment when I'm on my deathbed regretting that I didn't spend more time with them. That's like the main thing, like, and not just fear of regret, but also just, enjoying, the precious time that we have together. That's kind of my main focus. So, to anybody watching, like, hey, are you still alive? Like, yeah, I am. I just don't upload hardly ever anymore. Cause
it's funny you say that because Lex Fridman is a hardcore computer scientist,
yeah,
but most of the content he makes that people really like is about what you just talked about, philosophy and life. And again, why was he interviewing Kanye West? He's not a computer programmer by any means, but he's interviewed a lot of interesting people because he's a real person. He's not like I said, again, I keep casting aspersions at journalists, but you're a real person that has a real specific skill set in chemistry. It doesn't make you any more qualified than anybody else to interview Kanye West. But it's really, I think you should have him on next. Is my short pitch for you.
That's the dream I had last night. I had a dream I was interviewing Kanye West. I'm just kidding.
But I think it's something. There's something to be said about one, real people, but also people who are experts in something. And I think again, many journalists don't have that expertise. And whether it's Roundup or other sort of interesting things, I'd love to see you sort of make content that can like, again, Lex is a really good prototype for how does a scientist become a celebrity. And again, I know you may not want to be a celebrity, but the point is that your content can, I think, go to tons more people. And anyway, the molecules that we were talking about, they're not ready for human consumption. They're not ready for anything. All they are is, like we said, ideas where chemists can say, I don't think you could put that functional group there. Let me try this in real life, because this is just a computer program, right? It doesn't do anything but be a fancy calculator. And it's not a pharmaceutical company. It's not something that, I'm ever going to sort of be able to make a drug with it and raise the price again. It's just a tool for people that I felt people needed. It's free, which is also unique. The platforms that are out there right now that are similar to this, they're not free. They're very, very expensive. And I thought I'd want to do something for not just pharmaceutical and academic people, but also kids. I wish I had this program when I was a kid. I wish I could look at proteins and say, oh, wow, I can maybe make a cancer drug. That kind of tool, like Avogadro, I don't know if you ever use that thing, or ChemDraw, or, like stuff like that.
I use ChemDraw every day. Yeah, ChemDraw is
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly. Like those tools aren't that available for the average Joe. And
Yeah.
when I was 10 or 11, I would have loved to have that. I would have played with it all day long. And, unfortunately, a lot of these scientific tools aren't just there for people like us who are nerdy kids that want to learn this stuff. I don't know when you first learned chemistry. Have you told your audience about that?
They have told my audience when I first learned chemistry.
When you first got bitten by the bug. I mean, I was a young kid. For me,
Yeah.
I started drawing any molecule I could on a piece of paper, and I thought I could draw all the molecules in the world. And I was doing that at 10 or 11. When I first figured out how valence works, and I just would sit there and draw molecules. Say, what is this thing? What's that thing? As long as it obeyed the Lewis structure laws, I kept doing it. So I don't know when you first started being interested in this stuff.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because like my daughter and I, my 4-year-old and I, over the past couple of years, we've actually played with a lot of these molecular models together. That's what is this? Hexane right here. And she's actually gotten pretty good. Like I have a video of her at age 2 sitting with like a bunch of different molecules, around her. And I'll tell her like, hey, go pick up acetone. And she like literally picks up, and like, I'll be like, hey, go pick up benzene. I'll send it to you if you want to see it. But it's like,
I think your fans want to see this. You created a monster.
Well, I put it on Instagram, and like the latest one on Instagram is one of my daughter. She brought a molecule to show and tell, and she's talking about like the bonds in it and the hydrogen, and she's like 3 at the time. I mean, it's really cool, and it's like I don't force that on her. Like it's not a hard sell for a toddler to be interested in these like colorful round objects that you connect together. So, and she wants to learn more. It's really cool, watching somebody grow and develop, and especially at an age where they just want to learn everything. And that's kind of the thing, is just not to lose that, right?
I think that's the coolest thing ever. Like a lot of people, like I said, like we said earlier, think of this like greedy corporate executive that's rapacious. I never made $1 from that whole pyrimethamine fiasco. I never got 1 cent from that. I didn't have a salary at that company. I never got a dividend payment. It's not what I'm interested in. What you just said is like one of the coolest stories I've ever heard. And like, that's the kind of stuff that life's about, not about, can you make this many millions of dollars, or can you, buy this thing or that thing? Like, to me, I've learned over time that stuff's pretty lame, and that it's about being the best father you can be, the best teacher you can be. And people have asked me, Martin, why did you make hundreds of YouTube videos teaching stuff? And it just the same thing. Maybe I have that question for you. I mean, why would you do that? To me, it was just called out. I don't know, for whatever reason.
It's just fun, and it's rewarding. And back when I had more engagement, it was like there was a long, several years period of time where not a day would go by where I didn't get some, comment thanking me for, using the right analogy, or putting it in a way that they could understand, and omitting all of the unnecessary fluff. Cause I've always kind of had that like, just chemistry, no bullshit kind of attitude, which I don't know if that's been like good for like channel growth or anything like that. I recently put out a poll asking my audience whether or not they're like genuinely interested in chemistry, or if they just need to do well in chemistry to do well in their class. And it came like 60-40 interested versus not interested. And I'm like, because the way I would teach to somebody who's interested is different than the way I would to just, you're just trying to pass. Right. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, like, talking about that curiosity, like never losing that curiosity. I think, when you are tired and you have to like pay your bills, and, somebody's nagging at you and you don't like your boss, it's like you can kind of just let that die. And I imagine the same is also true when you're, at the top, making all these big executive decisions like, hey, do you want to do this or do that? It's $2 million. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like I can only imagine how much pressure is involved with that too. But I think it's pretty cool. Like, let me ask you this. So you're involved in like, you seem to have like a high level of skill in so many different areas, like computational chemistry, programming, even chess, like all this shit. How do you, like, what does a typical day look like for you? Do you say like, hey, from 9 to 10, I'm going to focus on programming. From 10 to 11, I'm going to focus on like, what's a typical day for you like nowadays?
Oh, it's really I mean, it's been changing, obviously. I had 4 years that was very atypical, for instance. But it's funny. So when I'm in the corporate sort of world, you don't have the time to sort of do some of that stuff, like you said. And I think you have to make use of the weekend, things like that. And you're starting this family. One of my close business partners also has children around your age, and he has no time. I mean, he has zero time to indulge in curiosity. He has zero time to even, quite frankly, put in that 8 p.m. at night, staying up, ordering pizzas with the coworkers and figuring out something. Like, once you start having a family, you can't do it. It's just not possible. And I think it's one of the reasons I haven't had a family yet, even though I'm 39. And maybe, who knows, maybe I'll never have one, because I just love and have this deep curiosity that on weekends or whatever, I want to learn about graph theory. I want to learn about, number theory. I want to learn about this and that. And the problem with that is you end up knowing a little bit about a lot of things, but you don't know a lot about a lot of things. And that's really hard to do. I've tried my whole life to do that. And sometimes I've succeeded, but sometimes I've failed. For example, if you drew a fairly simple molecule and said, Martin, how do you make this? I probably wouldn't have the best answer. And I wish I could. But if you drew, a certain proof or something like that in math, and you said, prove that they're an infinite primes. Well, I could probably do that one. But prove something, about sphere packing in 8 dimensions. I couldn't answer that, and but I want to, And sometimes if your appetite for intellect and knowledge is so big, nobody can fulfill that appetite if it's that big. And I think that curbing that and like getting down to specific goals is really hard to do. So I let my sort of corporate goals start, especially if I have other people's money and things like that, where I have to be really smart and careful about that to the extent I can be, and fulfill those responsibilities for myself, my family, shareholders, or whatever. And then I think about me and what Martin wants to indulge in. And a kid in a candy store is what I describe myself when I'm in PubMed or when I'm in like a Google Scholar type, academic search environment, because I could read everything. I love JMedChem. I would read JMedChem in prison, and I had an assistant send me by paper all the JMedChem papers. She's probably watching this or going to watch this now. She's a chemist who's also a bachelor's degree chemist, and she would send me all the JMedChems. She would analyze them, pick out the ones that she thought I'd like, and I would just sit there in a prison cell reading JMedChem, when most people would be sitting in a prison cell not doing that. And I'm just blessed with this intellectual curiosity that's insatiable. But the problem is that, it cuts both ways. I'm not the chemist you are. I'm not the chemist Dr. Rhino is, or nobody will ever be the chemist Dr. Sharpless is. And, I want to be, but, no matter how much you want to be, it's not going to make it happen. So for me, balancing reality with that desire is hard. And sometimes I'll go off on a programming lark where I'm doing it for 8 hours, and I look at the clock and it's 3 a.m. and I say, oh my God, I have to get my taxes ready or something. And, if we could all just like study all day for the rest of our lives, it would be awesome, and some part of me thinks maybe I should have been a professor or something. But even as a professor, right, you have to publish, you have to get grants, you got to do all this stuff that's just not that pure search of knowledge.
Yeah. Shit, I was going to ask you something, but I totally just drew a blank right now. I can't remember what it was. Damn. Oh, so you said earlier that you didn't actually like produce any like GMP material in-house. Is that right? What is your opinion or your take on like the regulations that like the FDA regulations and stuff like that surround the production of active pharmaceutical ingredients? Do you think it's like kind of where it should be? Do you think it's overkill? Do you think it's not enough? What's your opinion on that?
It's really a great question, and I'm a libertarian or whatever. I'm a little bit right leaning, but I'm not like an alt-right loony. Or I hope I don't offend anybody saying that. But so a lot of my libertarian friends say, Martin, don't you hate the FDA? Aren't they always getting in your way with the regulations? I totally don't think that's right. I think the FDA does a brilliant job. I think they're one of the best, if maybe the only, and again, I'm putting my libertarian hat on, effectual part of government, where having worked up close and personal with FDA over the years, I think that the way they look at APIs and the way they ensure that all the medicine we take is safe, but not getting in the way too much either. You can regulate something to death. They have to let the industry do its thing, but they also have to safeguard hundreds of millions of people that depend on medicine. So I think they do it all right. Now, to get down to more specifics, stability is a question that a lot of people have issues with, because you have to put stuff on stability and make sure you have the right answers before you go into trials and stuff like that. And it's a bane of a lot of companies' existence. But if you time everything right, you can kind of get your stability right while you're doing analytical methods and other stuff like that. And so, like, the way the FDA has it set up, I really think it's great. Now, there are some molecules where, you have these issues and you have to restart stability or something like that. And you look back and say, oh my God, FDA is getting in my way. But in general, I think on the chemistry and sort of whatever molecule it is, but especially on the small molecule side, they got it just right. It's not too onerous, and it's not too, easy. Because if it was too easy, that'd be bad too, I think. Some of the things I don't like, I'll give you one example that was sort of a bit of a disaster, is there's an arbitrary set of expectations sometimes when you file your IND. On the chemistry side, I think things are fairly good. But on the tox side, you'll often see this, like we had one IND rejected because we did 7 days of tox, and the guy at FDA said, no, it's got to be 28 days. I said, do you have any scientific basis for why it has to be 28 days? He said, no, I'm just telling you it has to be 28 days. And I'm sitting there saying, you understand that, like, you're messing up our clinical trial program. You're messing up the patients who are waiting on this thing. We got to redo this whole thing. It's going to take 6 months. What in the world are you doing that you think that this thing's going to be less safe or more safe after 28 days of tox versus 7 days of tox with no adverse events limit? Like, this drug is safe. We did it all CGMP, but you want an extra 3 weeks, so we got to go order animals. We got to go do this whole thing again.
Yeah.
You're out of your mind. And so sometimes those things will happen. I don't doubt that they happen on the chemistry too. Sometimes, like, an assay has to be redone because FDA doesn't like the assay. That can happen. And in general, it seems like it's okay and pretty well done to me. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, like I said, in PR&D, I kind of work on my own sort of silo. I don't do like the QC stability testing or anything like that. And QA is the department in our CDMO that handles the FDA the most frequently. But I have to tell you, for about somewhere between 18 months and 2 years, I worked every single day in this quarantine facility that's separate from the main building, where we were producing beta-lactam API. And interestingly, this API wasn't actually an antibiotic. It was used to treat blood clots. So it's basically like a drug that you can use intravenously to break up blood clots without causing the severe bleeding that the currently available drugs to treat blood clots cause, right? And it also, apparently, this drug doesn't require the administration of like a reversal agent to counteract the effect of it. It'll just cycle through one system. So it kind of addresses like a really urgent unmet medical need. But anyway, that's kind of going off on a tangent there. To work in this beta-lactam facility, like, you have to like go into this gowning room. You have to doff your street clothes, don your coveralls, go in, and then let's say you need a drink of water. You got to doff your coveralls, take a shower, go out, get your gulp of water, go back in, doff your street clothes, don your coverall. And it's just, and I kind of looked it up, like, how serious are beta-lactams? Like, what percentage of the population is deathly allergic to this stuff? And it's like, most of the people who are allergic to it, all they get is like a skin rash. And it just seems like regulatory overkill to me, because it seems to me like if we treated everything with the same level of precaution with which we treat beta-lactams, then no stores would have like peanut butter on their shelves, because some people are definitely allergic to peanut butter. And it just seemed like it didn't make much sense to me, the whole, it seemed like regulatory overkill. But I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, I think that happens a lot. And then the opposite happens a lot. For example, I'll see a drug get FDA approval, and then in the letters, in the fine print, it'll say that they didn't do a toxicology study. There's a certain toxicology study called the carcinogenicity study, where you have to do long-term carc, and you need 2 years of mouse data before you get approval that shows that you don't have increased carcinogenicity in mice or rats. And a lot of companies have a problem with this, because when they're ready for FDA approval, to do a 2-year carc study takes 3 years, and you have to also plan it. You need time to do the run-in, and then you need time to analyze the specimens. So you need to really have your ducks in a row, and you don't always know that you're ready to do this CARC study. If you get phase 2 results that are good, you may be able to get approval on phase 2, sometimes if they're really good results. And so, but you don't have your CARC study ready. So a lot of times the FDA will look at it and say, you know what, we'll let you do the CARC study after. And it's just totally capricious, like, decision on their part to say, yeah, we'll let you do this, yeah, we won't let you do this. And a lot of times will boil down to some guy at FDA or gal at FDA that says, this is good enough for me. And they make a judgment call. And again, for whatever reason, I've had good luck. It's worked out for me. But I think there are a lot of horror stories like yours. I've heard plenty where some capsule had the wrong, they changed the food coloring capsule, and that derailed the clinical trial by over a year. That's a disaster. That's regulatory overkill probably. But I also respect, generally, like I said, my own experience is all I have to go on, and it seems to be pretty good.
Let me ask you this. I'll sort of go on to a different topic. So you had your I guess we can call it a societal hiatus. When you got back, did you like notice anything different? Because I guess like these incremental changes that happen with your interactions with people or society or whatever, you're kind of not aware of on the day to day. But when you're kind of on hiatus for a few years and then you come back, was there anything in your day to day interactions with people that kind of jumped out as dramatically different to you?
Actually, there's one thing I'll mention. So when I was in prison, this is the least woke environment you can ever see. And when I went into prison, I was considered this anti-woke rebel that was kind of a little, maybe even dangerous, the way I was thinking and talking. And I went into prison, and you can't imagine, I can't even say some of the stuff that I'm thinking, that this is not a place for tolerance and wokeness. And I would explain to people like, no, trans is a thing, and you have to use pronouns in certain situations and things like that. And people would say, doing that, Martin, you're crazy. What are you talking about? I said, no, that's the way the world is out there. If you want a corporate job, you have to act like this, and you have to say this, and you have to respect this and that. And they were like, nah, you're nuts, Martin. You're a this or you're a that. And I said, no, you don't understand. The world looks at me as a rebel. So if you're not thinking that what I'm saying is palatable, then you're really even further a rebel than I am. And some of these people said, no, I don't care. And I came out of prison, and I've seen that again, I'm a pro-LGBT person. I respect trans rights. I have a lot of friends in the LGBT community that are some of my dearest friends. And if someone wants to identify as their gender, I respect that. I maybe didn't fully respect that many years ago, but I do now. And there's a lot of science behind this. It's interesting. We won't go off on that tangent. But the point is that when I came out of prison, it's one thing for LGBT community, but even things like more of the woke stuff on the sort of extreme side that you see in the corporate world sometimes with diversity, inclusion, and equity, and other sort of the wokeisms of that get very extreme. I've seen that kind of recede a bit. That when I went into prison in 2017, there was this peak wokeism. And that's sort of died down, that people are like, a lot of this stuff was overdone, and that, we have to learn to live with each other and not get too sort of caught up in microaggression training and stuff like that, that some of the stuff is just kind of going to live. We have to live and let live. And I'm kind of happy that that's happened. And that's the perception that I have. I could be dead wrong, and it's gotten worse and crazier in some ways. But I think that, like, there aren't too many people fighting over should there be 2 bathrooms or 3 bathrooms or this and that. And like that world is probably fading away into the back picture. That's sort of the one thing I'd say.
I think one of the big things now is the whole, people trying to like attack and undermine a child's sense of reality and who they are, and encouraging them to get like these irreversible life altering treatments. That is something that, I can't think of many more abominable actions than to do that to a child. And then you have these parents who are just kind of, experimenting on their children to show how progressive they are. And I mean, that is something that, and again, like any adult who does what who is of sound mind, because in order to exercise self-ownership, you kind of have to have you have to kind of be playing with a full deck, so to speak. So anybody who can exercise self-ownership and chooses to do whatever, totally respect it. It's fine. Okay. But when you start destabilizing impressionable children and then they, get some treatment and they can't go back, that I have a huge problem with that.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think that that's the last bastion of wokeism that's probably dying, I think. I think most people, left, right, whatever, they agree with you. And that fringe, that super fringe that had a big voice over the last 5 or 10 years, that fringe their voice is dropping. And I think people are getting back to reality, getting back to, for example, that's, I think, like you said, abominable. But let's talk about something that's less intense, like safe spaces and stuff like that. Like, people are starting to say, all right, look, let's not, get really upset over small things. There's a Google programmer who got fired for writing this very intelligent, right, thought. It wasn't a popular thought. He's not a crazy guy. He works at Google. He wrote up this whole thing. He said maybe there are less programmers at Google who are women because of reasons other than, the obvious. And in other words, that there's some systematic suppression of women in programming or something like that. And he got fired. And I didn't think what he said was like totally wrong. I think he is a little wrong, but some of the stuff he said is worth thinking about and worth talking about. And I think that the environment's starting to shift, where like Dave Chappelle is the people at Netflix. I think 5 years ago they would have fired him, but now the people at Netflix says, you know what? We're not going to fire this guy. We're going to keep him going. And if you want to walk out of Netflix because you don't like it, then walk out. And I think 3 people quit. And the company just starts, all right, whatever. What's next? And I think I'm glad that like this like brinksmanship of like, no, let's get more woke. Let's get more woke. That we're starting to walk that back and say, all right, there's a limit to this stuff. I think we should respect if somebody wants to be called a certain pronoun. I respect that. I think other people should. But to your point, I mean, some of the stuff that's really extreme and some of the really super sensitive, stuff like that. I personally think coming out of prison, like I see people being a little more cool and a little bit more like, okay, I kind of understand like people are going to be people and you can't force people to feel a certain way or force people to be, this sensitive. So like the toxic masculinity thing is sort of starting to fade into the background, and more people are saying, you know what, maybe it's okay to be masculine. Maybe it's okay for, like a lot of women tell me all the time, Martin, I just want to be a mom. Like and I'm afraid to say that. And I think like more and more women are being able to stand up and say, you know what, this life is not for me. I want to be just a mother that takes care of a family. And I hear that more and more and see that more and more on Twitter. And I think that's a good thing.
And that's such an important component of a healthy society, is for, parents to actually be raising their own children. And nurturing the next generation of human consciousness on this planet, is way more important than like climbing up the corporate ladder at Starbucks. Like how, I have my sort of speculations on the origins of all the stuff that, women are, because I think women are kind of in a difficult place because they got biology telling them one thing, and then they have society telling them something that's antithetical to what their biology is telling them. And I think that puts them in a really challenging situation, to the point where they, you've heard the story before, the women who miss their window of fertility, and then, you're 40, you don't have kids, and you're going to live to be at least 80. Like that's a long time to live, having missed out on, one of the, if not the best aspect of life in general. So it's tough for women, not in the way that most people would say it's tough for women, but I think it's tough for women in that respect.
Oh, I've gone out of my way to support women executives, paying them, as much as I can that the market will bear and make sense, and promoting them. And a lot of the people that wrote to my judge in my sentencing were my women executives who had done so much better than they ever thought they would. And I enjoy helping the underdog achieve their goals. At the same time, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I do think like raising a family is a harder job and a more important job than any job we do in corporate world. And, that's changed a bit. Again, the corporate rat race is something that I think more and more families are deciding may not be for them. And more and more people women specifically who have this unique role as the one birth giver that can do that role. And again, I'm not a traditionalist. I don't think I think women should be able to do and will do and cannot be stopped from doing whatever they want. But at the same time, there is that elephant in the room. So, I think, again, wokeism is sort of starting to die its death. It doesn't mean that it will completely go away. But I do think that's the one change in society that I can sort of point to that is not such a bad thing. And I do think, like, I've found myself in this paradoxical position where people have said, "Oh, Shkreli, you've gone soft," and stuff like that. And I'm like, I haven't changed. I stand for what's right in certain situations, and I will condemn what I feel is wrong in other situations. And to your point about sort of this weird situation where 6-year-olds are being asked what their gender is, stuff like that. It's uncomfortable for me. It's uncomfortable for I think 99% of society. I think it's that weird sort of 1% that's so ultra progressive that they're that voice again. I think has gone from being really loud to now people are sort of telling that voice to kind of cool it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, listen, Martin, if you haven't changed, then when's the next hater hotline coming?
I maybe I have changed a little.
Those are the best, man. Like I think I told you this in the LinkedIn DMs, but every once in a while I'll just go back to those. I guess some of your fans just recorded videos of you, going live, just talking shit, roasting people back and forth. That's like that's something that I can just leave there for like 3 months and then come back, listen to it again, and it's like brand new again. It's just like an endless cycle of lifetime entertainment. I fucking love it.
I enjoy entertaining people, and I think I have a small knack or gift for it with comedy and things like that. But the problem is, like, I thought about, like, should I just become like Howard Stern or Joe Rogan? Like, should I focus on these hard problems like in math and science?
Yeah.
And probably I'm better off, doing that than telling fart jokes and roasting people. But maybe one day I'll do it again.
Yeah, I don't know, man. There's something. It was just so much fun to watch. I don't know. Especially, I think I told you this too. That one kid that was like, he called you a retard, and then you like somehow figured out how to like track down like his Facebook and his like, which university he was going to, and you're like emailing the president of his university, like, hey, just want to let you know this guy's like. And then like you tried to call him back, but he like wasn't answering, and stuff like that was just epic, dude. I understand. Are you embarrassed about any of that stuff?
I think as long as people understand it's entertainment, and that, I have an audience, I had an audience, and when you have an audience on YouTube, it's like you said, we're talking about cracking the algorithm and all this stuff. Like, you have to keep them engaged and entertained. And the more I stream where I'm just like reading a paper and I'm not engaging with people, they're like, "Martin, tell us about something, do something entertaining." I'm like, I'm not a monkey. I'm not going to sit here and dance for you. Like, I'm doing what I'm doing. If you think this is interesting, keep tuning in. If you don't. And I think there's this like weird compulsion as influencers, or for us micro influencers or whatever. Like, we,
I'm a nano influencer.
Like, being sort of asked to entertain and asked to do this and that. And it's like, back then, like, I wanted to be a people pleaser because I had this terrible public image that, maybe I still have one, but at that time was really acute and temporally like right there. And I was like, no, I need to entertain these people. I need to make them think that, I'm not make them think, tell them, show them that I'm not what they think. And that just sort of came out of the blue. Sometimes I was angry and I wanted to roast people because I disagreed with them. The past has come and gone, and now like I'm much more sedate and kind of chill about it. If people want to come and hate on me, I still will give it to them. But more and more, I think people have come to where you're at on this, and other people that so many other people have said, Martin, I've reviewed the facts, and you're actually not such a bad guy. And some people will even do the opposite. I was in the doctor's office today, taking pictures of the whole staff, saying, "We love you." And I was just like, all right, so I'm really lucky to have gotten a second chance, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course. All right. Well, I think that wraps up pretty much everything. I mean, I'm sure I could go on and on and on, but thanks for joining me, Martin. Where can folks find you nowadays?
I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitch. I'm focused on the Druglike project for making great computational chemistry software accessible for everyone. So I'm around some of the social media on that. People, it's funny, I respond to emails, like I'm on Discord. You can just sit and talk with me all day if you want. It's, my pleasure and joy to sort of interact with people just like you do with all the people you talk to in your community.
Yeah, I was surprised, man, when you replied to my LinkedIn DM. I was like, holy shit! I didn't even believe it was you. I was like, and it's funny because like I noticed like back in the day you subbed to my YouTube channel, and when my brother showed me like your content, and I was like, oh yeah, I think he subbed to my YouTube channel. And I'm like, yeah, here's my channel page. Let's see all the channels that are subscribed. Up there he is. And my brother was just like, dude, he's like, you need to go work for him, you need to get paid, bro. And I'm like, it doesn't, and at the time I was working, with like nanoscale, like nanoparticle rocket fuels and propellants. I'm like, we don't really have much of an experiential overlap. I don't think I can provide much value, and therefore not get paid very much by Mr. Shkreli. But it's
You could
funny.
work for Elon.
What's that?
You could have worked for Elon Musk.
Yeah, yeah. But now it's kind of interesting because I've sort of changed jobs, and now I do have a little bit more, eyeballs into the pharmaceutical thing. Although I do like work on my own silo, like I was kind of criticizing the pharmaceutical executives who didn't know anything about the structures of but really all I need to know is structures and how to improve yield and purity. I don't really need to know anything about what condition the drug even treats because I just make the stuff, you know what I mean? So we all kind of work on our own little silo. But anyway, I think I'm kind of rambling at this point. So I guess we can wrap it up for now. And yeah, man, thanks again for coming on, dude.
Thank you so much, Ben.
All right, man. Take care.